All right, here we go. This is page 5 of your final review packet, and I'm going to do questions 43 to 51, and it's all on our recent chapter of solving quadratics. So I'm just going to kind of refresh with our flow chart. So first you have to have standard form. Now there are only 3 methods that I use. The one that I start with is factoring, and I ask myself, can I factor this easily? If I can, then I factor it, and then you set your factors equal to 0 to solve. The next question I ask is, am I missing the middle linear term? So notice that middle term that has the letter x with no power on it. This one has a power of 2. This term has no letter. So if I'm missing that middle linear term, I use the square root method. So I'll isolate my square, and I'll square root both sides, but don't forget that plus minus sign. And then I skip completing the square. If you want to try that, go for it. In my opinion, it's just a little more complicated than what you need to do. And then last, instead of completing the square, I normally go right to quadratic formula. And again, you need to identify your A, the number A, B, and C, and then you just plug it in this formula and you get your 2 solutions. Now, if you start with what's called the discriminant, this is the piece that goes inside that radical, that will tell you how many solutions you can have. So if this is a positive number, you can have 2 solutions. If it's a perfect square, you could have factored a positive perfect square. If it's 0, you'll get 1 answer, and if this inside this radical sign is a negative, stop, don't do the whole formula, and you can put no real solution. So here we go. There are 9 problems. I might seem to go a little fast, but you can always pause and rewind. And again, I'll just state which method I'm going to use according to that flow chart that we had this school year. So for number 43, I notice how I only have an x squared term, so I'm going to isolate it so that I can solve by square root method. So I'm going to write SQ for square root method. I'm going to divide by 3 on both sides so that my x squared is equal to 25. And I know that if I undo a square, that means apply the square root. So the square and the square root undo each other. And just don't forget that plus minus sign. I'd say that's probably the thing that most people forget. And the square root of 25 is 5, but we're also going to include in our solution -5, and here's why. -5 times -5 equals positive 25. Okay, here we go. The next one here, can I factor this easily? I'm going to check. A times C is 10, B is -7. Can 2 numbers multiply to make 10, add to make 7? Sure, a 5 and a 2. If they're both negative, they'll multiply to be a positive. If they are both negative, they'll add to make -7. And so here I'm going to do what's called split my middle. So my -7x is going to be instead, now I see here, notice this, 2 and 2, I'm going to pair those together, and 5 and 5. So I'm going to rearrange the order just because of what I see in my problem. Now I have 2 middle terms instead of 1, and I'm going to do a factor by grouping. So I'm going to take out the GCF of the first 2 terms, and I'm left with GCF of 2x, I'm left with then x minus 1. And both of these 2 numbers, now if I need this to match, notice, I need this to be an x and a -1. Then I need to divide by the negative sign so that this sign becomes positive and this sign becomes negative. And actually, 5 divided by 5 is not 5, it's 1. So our factors are x minus 1 and 2x minus 5. Now on the previous page of your review packet, you'd be done here, but we are solving now. So set each of these equal to 0 for your solutions. And I should still have, because it says equals 0 here, equals 0 here. So if these 2 things multiply to make 0, that means one of them has to be 0. So here I'm going to solve by adding 1, and my solution, not just my factor, but my solution is 1. Here I'll add 5, and I have 2x equals 5, or x equals 5 halves. And those are my 2 solutions. So here, 5 and -5, here, 1 and 5 halves. If you want to put the decimal down here, totally fine. Now I also notice that I can factor this easily, so I'm going to put F for factoring. Because of these 2 terms, they share something in common, I'm going to take out the factor of A. And then if I take 1a away from each of the terms, this would be the factor that remains. And now this is factoring by GCF. This one was factoring by a greater than 1. So I'm going to set my factor a equal to 0. That's one of my solutions. And 7a minus 3, I'm going to set this equal to 0 by adding 3 to both sides. I can start solving now and then divide by 7. And I'm going to leave it there as my fraction. 3/7 and 0. All right, now next row. Oh, standard form. Notice how this says here you have to have this set equal to 0, and that's how I'm going to determine how I'm going to solve. So my 3 is on the wrong side. I'm going to move it back over here. Okay, now I'm going to think, can I factor this easily? A times C is -6, adds to make -6. What multiplies to make 6 and adds to make 6? 6 and 1, no. 3 and 2, no. I'm not going to be able to factor this. So instead, I'm going to use quadratic formula. So QF for quadratic formula. My A is the number 2, my B is the number -6, and my C is the number -3. And then here is our quadratic formula here. I'm going to kind of put these side by side. X equals opposite sign of your B. So if my B is -6, the opposite of that would be a +6. I'm going to add and subtract, so I'm going to get 2 answers. Now the square root of B squared, -6 times -6 is 36. And I'm going to subtract 4 times my A of 2 times my C of -3. So I'm really going to be subtracting negative. Okay, 4 times 3 is 12. 12 times 2 is 24. 36 minus -24, that's going to go inside that radical. All over 2a. 2a double 2. 2 times 2 is 4. So let me just simplify what's underneath that radical next. 36 minus a negative, 4 times 2 is 6, 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 3 is 24. Subtracting a negative will be 36 plus 24, and I get 60 underneath that radical sign. Now this is how you're going to type it in on your calculator. Ready? I want to show you so you can use this tool to help you out. You're going to type in 6. First we're going to do add. And now square root. Second, and my square button is my square root, and 60. Whether you end the parentheses here or not won't matter, but you have to hit enter and get the top before you divide by 4. And this is one of my solutions, 3.4. This 3 is going to round up because that 6 is going to round that 3 up to a 4. So if this is a 5 or higher, it'll round that number up. Now I'm going to use my up arrow key and go back to what I had typed in, but now this time where you see that plus sign, I'm going to rewrite over that a subtract. Now again, you have to hit enter to get the numerator before you divide by the number 4. And here's my second solution. It would be -0.4. Now again, 3, 6, that 6 is going to round that 3 up to a 4, and those are my 2 solutions. Okay, here we go. In the next one, I noticed that I do have a GCF. So before I decide, I am going to factor with a GCF of 3, because I wonder if then factoring would be a little easier. Okay, can I find 2 numbers that multiply to make -2 and add to make 1? 2 and 1. 2 and a -1 will multiply to make -2. 2 subtract 1 is 1. So those are my factors. X with a +2, X with a -1. I love these when A is equal to 1 because factoring is pretty easy. Now if I set 3 equal to 0, this makes no sense. 3 is not the same as 0, so there's no letter, so ignore it because there's no solving. Okay, so this you completely ignore because there's no letter. You will use it for graphing, but not for solving. And graphing comes next. So set my next factor, x plus 2 equal to 0. Subtract 2 on both sides, I get -2. X minus 1, set this equal to 0. Add 1 to both sides to solve, and you get a solution of +1. There's your 2 answers. All right, next one. When you see a group in parentheses, group meaning parentheses squared, that means we're going to use square root method. The group is already isolated, so to undo the square, I'm going to square root both sides from here. Now the square is going to go away, so I'm left with x plus 5, and I have that equal to a positive and negative square root of 100, and I know the square root of 100 is 10. Now, I think this is where students get a little mixed up. They think, oh, well, it's just plus minus 10. Well, it's not. X plus 5 is equal to 10, or x plus 5 is equal to -10. It might benefit you to write this out because you could have 10 or you could have negative 10. If you write it out, you're probably not going to go wrong when you solve it, because when you subtract 5, you're going to subtract 5 from 10. Well, 10 minus 5 is 5. But negative 10 minus 5 is negative 15. So if you write it out twice, it'll probably help you solve just a hair easier than if you don't. Okay, last row here, 3 more, we're nearly there. Getting towards our final page of our review packet. Again, what I'm going to do here, I noticed that all of these terms have a GCF, so I'm going to try factoring. And they're all divisible by 5. So I'm going to divide every term by 5. Now, can I factor here? 2 things that multiply to 2 add to make negative 3. Oh, how about a 2 and a 1? 2 times 1 makes 2, 2 plus 3 makes 3, but if they're both negative, I'll get negative 3. So these are my factors, x with a negative 2, x with a negative 1. Now again, just like what I said up here on this problem, if there is no letter in your factor, it makes no sense to set that equal to 0. So this we ignore because there's no letter to solve for. But x minus 2 we can set equal to 0. And when we solve, we'll have a solution of 2. And x minus 1, if we set this equal to 0 and we add 1 to both sides, we get a solution of 1. Okay, last one. Nope, second to last one, my bad. There's 2 more. Subtract 1, that's how I'm going to decide how I'm going to start. I need to have all my terms on the same side of the equal sign. It says standard form is a must. Make sure you do that first, obviously. A, B, C. Let's see if we can factor. A times C is negative 4. Negative 5 goes in the middle at the bottom. What multiplies to make a negative has to be a positive and a negative. What multiplies to make 4 could make 5 would have to be a 4 and 1, but I have a feeling our signs aren't going to work for us, because a 4 subtract 1 would get us 3. And then if you were like, oh, well, just change your signs. Okay, so I'll make this guy a negative, this guy a positive. Negative 4 plus 1 is negative 3. It doesn't work. So factoring, no go. So what I'm going to do instead is quadratic formula. A is going to be the number 4, B is the number 5, and C is the number negative 1. And again, if you know the quadratic formula, you just literally plug in A, B's, and C's where they say you're supposed to go, simplify, and you can get your 2 answers. So x equals opposite sign of your B. Your B is negative 5. The opposite of that would be positive 5. Then we'll add and we'll subtract. Okay, now negative 5 times negative 5, this is b squared. Negative 5 times negative 5 is 25. This number here will always be positive, because no matter if you multiply positive times positive, negative times negative, you'll always get a positive. Okay, now 4 times my A is 4, times my C, which is negative 1. All of this gets divided by double A. 2 times 4 is 2 times 4 is 8. So that's going to go at the bottom. Now let's simplify what goes underneath that radical sign next. I like to get the rest of it kind of ready for me. Okay, 25 minus, so I'm going to write up here. A negative is in here, so this is going to be minus a negative. 4 times 4 is 16. So I have 25 minus negative 16. So you're going to end up adding and you get 41. So 41 is going to go inside our symbol, radical symbol here. Now use your calculator. This is your tool. Know how to use your tool. I'm going to show you how to use your tool. You have to type in the top, hit enter, then divide by 8 and you'll get your answer. So we're going to type in 5, a plus sign, the square root symbol, second in my square button is my square root, and the number 41. Now if you don't hit parentheses, it's going to be okay, because there's nothing else going on here. I hit enter, that's the numerator of our fraction, and now divide by 8. Notice how it says answer divided by 8. Here's one of my solutions. It's 1.4. Now this 2 is going to get rounded up because anything 5 or higher is going to round that number up. So 1.43 is a solution. Now let's go back up and see where we have that plus sign. We are also going to do, because it says plus and minus sign, so we're going to hit subtract. Again, you have to hit the enter button before you divide by 8. If you don't, you will not get the correct answer. So negative 0.175. The 5 is going to round that 7 up to 1/8. And those are our 2 answers. All right, Here we go, last one for the page. Page 5, Final Exam Review 2021. This is a group in parentheses squared, so I'm going to use the square root method, and I'm going to isolate that group. So I'm going to undo a half. How I undo a half? Double both sides. That'll get rid of my half. Okay, 18 times 2 is 36. Now I have a square equals 36. Something squared equals 36. Well, wouldn't that make sense that that's 6? So let me show you. Square root both sides. You get rid of your square with the square root and you get positive and negative 6. X minus 4 could equal 6. X minus 4 could equal negative 6. So now I'm going to add 4 to both sides. Actually, to both of them. 6 plus 4 means one solution is 10. Negative 6 plus 4 is a solution of negative 2. Here we go, page 5, all complete. Last page is super short. Stay tuned for our last final exam review video next.